Hey guys, it's Jen. This is another episode of Reframing Me, and I'm your host, Dr. Jennifer Brubaker. So, our conversation today stems from a text exchange that I had with one of my closest IRL friends that got me thinking about another actual conversation that I had, maybe a year or so ago. And at that time, I'm like, ooh, that's something I should totally talk about on the podcast. I put a pin in it and then I just haven't. And ironically, we're not talking about it today either. No, we'll talk about that actual topic like the next episode. Why, you may ask? Well, it's because I feel like we should talk about this first and then that. So ultimately, in the next episode, we're going to have a conversation about marital issues and marital communication and role conflict that seems to occur with many couples during the teen years. But I feel like in my own family and in my friends, and at least, 2 or 3 other conversations that I've had over the last number of months, many of the marital issues or conflicts between the couple seem to come from their differing perceptions or expectations regarding the teen's behavior and what one thinks something is a big deal and maybe the other one doesn't. One thinks they should have a job and the other thinks they should focus on school. One thinks they're too young to date and the other doesn't see anything wrong with it. One sees a behavior as being disrespectful and the other thinks that they're being unreasonable, that the kid is totally fine. Okay, I should stop there before I go off on a tangent and steal my own thunder for the next time. So anyway, before we can talk about that, I thought we should talk about behavior that our teens demonstrate that may ultimately lead to some of the marital conflict, like the behaviors that even the best of teens still succumb to, the it's just being a teen type of behaviors. Kind of like my puppy. Okay, my sweet little Winnie. She is such a good girl, but she's a puppy. She's like 5 months old. So anyone who has had a puppy knows that we are just hitting peak puppy time, right? Like curious, excited, wild, doesn't really listen yet because she's still just a baby and she's curious and she's still just trying to figure out the world. She's not bad. She's just a puppy. She's a good puppy, but she's a puppy. It's the same with teenagers, right? Even the very best teenagers are still teenagers. They're still going to do teenager things. And we, as their parents, we need to realize that we can't just yell or punish or get mad those things right out of them. They're things that is just what 16 is. Just like we can't expect a baby to speak yet to tell you what's wrong or to wait to the bathroom until they have to pee. And it doesn't matter how many times you explain to a 2-year-old that the markers are for paper only, you're gonna have the one who gets a Sharpie and writes Tobias in 100 places around the house. Oh yeah, that was mine. Tobis. No A. He forgot the A. But it was written in red Sharpie all over my house. Best part was, Tobias didn't do it. It was Kane. He found the Sharpie. He created a tribute to his very favorite person who he idolized. He wrote and misspelled his brother's name all over my house in Sharpie, red Sharpie. I told him and taught him that we always write on paper. I did not hand him a Sharpie, nor did I ever hand him a Sharpie. I thought he was napping. I checked on him periodically. He still managed to do it. And he was very proud of himself. He was so proud of his tribute to Tobias. Was his behavior bad? Was he bad? He was such a good little guy. He wasn't bad. He was just 2. And 2-year-olds do things that would be bad for 16-year-olds. But he was 2. Just like 16-year-olds do things that would be irresponsible for a 30-year-old. But she's 16, not 30. I don't get mad at the puppy when she is potty trained, but still sometimes she poops in my house. I get mad, of course, I'm mad that I have poop in my house, but I'm not mad at her. It was an accident, or she forgot, or whatever. She's A puppy. When my 7-year-old dog will randomly poop in the house, I do get mad at that one because I know that she knows that you don't poop in the house. She knows that it's bad, and I know that she only does it to be bad when she's upset about something, and she does it full well, knowing that what she is doing was wrong, and she just wants to do it. Oh yeah, we have that going on. But yet with teenagers, it's like we often expect things out of them or are mad that they're being teenagers when they are teenagers. We're not mad at toddlers for being toddlers. We're exhausted and frustrated about behavior or about the consequences of behavior, but not at the toddler for being a toddler. And I'm not mad at the puppy for being a puppy. And I feel like we often forget that compassion and fail to extend that same grace to teenagers, you know? So when my friend texted me the other day and was like, can we arrange a play date for our husbands because the communication and perception gap is killing me? She's like, I cannot explain for the 27th time that he is overreacting. I'm like, oh my God, same. And I realized that it was time. It was time to unpin the episode topic. So today we are going to have a conversation about teenagers. Shocking, I know, right? I mean, it's like we never talk about teenagers around here. But we're having a conversation about what is normal teenage behavior or actions or attitudes that are literally just teenagers being teenagers. And it's not really bad behavior. Yes, it might be annoying, or even if it's a bad behavior, it doesn't make them bad for doing it. It just makes them a teenager. And I think if we can kind of learn to differentiate between the two, because don't get me wrong, I'm not saying, oh, teens will be teens, because I hate that. I refuse to subscribe to the boys will be boys or girls will be girls, that kind of mentality to justify bad behavior. So I'm not justifying actual bad behavior. I'm just suggesting the differentiation between teen, quote unquote, bad behavior and actual bad behavior. Does that make sense? If not, hopefully, as we get into it, it will. Okay, so obviously, we all realize that adolescence is a critical developmental stage that is marked by rapid and significant physical, emotional, psychological, all kinds of changes, social. During this time, even the most well-behaved teenagers show behaviors that may frustrate us as their parents or anger us. We very often perceive these behaviors negatively, but they are actually rooted in these normal developmental processes rather than stemming from some kind of inherent defiance or some type of malice. So while it may totally feel like they are doing this on purpose just to be a problem or just to be mad, make me mad, or just to be annoying or to be disrespectful or whatever, they're really not. It's just a normal part of their development. And I hope that if we can understand these behaviors, looking at them through the lens of communication and psychology, we can help to manage our expectations and our interactions much more effectively and more peacefully. So at least if we can understand what is typical teenage behavior, or at least the top 5 teen behaviors. First, and probably the most identifiable characteristic of teenagers, those mood swings. Oh, and you know what? Let's just throw in that emotional sensitivity here too. I mean, just for fun. Yes, it is probably the most identifiable and stereotypical characteristic of teens. And we all know this, right? We all knew going in that teens are emotionally unhinged, right? And if we would have given it any serious thought, we probably would have realized that there was a lot of emotional sensitivity in there too. And yet, here we are, 15-ish years later, and we're like, why is he so moody? Or, she's so emotional. It's not their fault. Teens are being moody and emotionally sensitive due to the perfect storm combination of biological, psychological, and social factors. Okay. I mean, physically, or I guess rather biologically, let's use the official term, but biologically, teenagers undergo significant physical and hormonal changes. Their brains are still developing, especially the prefrontal cortex, which is the part that is responsible for their decision making and emotional regulation. This is what leads to mood swings and these emotional fluctuations. So, like the surges in hormones influence their emotions on a dime. And psychologically, teenagers are also going through a period of self discovery and identity formation. So they're out there just trying to figure out who they are, what they believe in, where they fit in this world. This really creates internal conflict and uncertainty, and it leads to emotional sensitivity. There's a pressure to conform to their peers and to their family's expectations of them. And this can all be really overwhelming. And their perception of what you're saying or what you're thinking about them or about their beliefs or their decisions, it can especially set them off because they're just figuring it all out too. It's like they're often just a half a step ahead of what we're seeing. So it's not like it's a deeply held belief or a significantly developed quality. They're just going through it at the same time we are. And so they're going to be extra sensitive about it. So, like, we had this happen. Honestly, it was yesterday. I had a very similar situation come up. I was sitting outside, and my daughter, she came out. And she sat down, and she always wears like a sports bra or like a tank top around. And she had this little tube top on. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, why do I recognize that? She never wears something like that. Oh, that looks really cute. And like, why do I recognize that? And like, oh my gosh, it's my tube top. I'm like, she must have gotten out of my drawer. I haven't seen that in ages. So I'm just sitting there as she's talking to me, and I'm like, looking at her and just kind of paying attention to it and like how cute she looked and how I can't believe how grown up she is. And she's just so beautiful. And I just was really, I don't know, I was just kind of admiring that she looked so cute. All right. Because she's my daughter and I'm weird like that. And I was just admiring how cute she looked. Well, then we got up, went inside, blah, blah, blah. I'm walking around. And then I go into the other room and I look at her and she's sitting there in like a totally different top. I'm like, where'd the tube top go? She's like, well, you were judging me. I'm like, I wasn't judging you. And I'm like, oh my God, I must have like been looking at her but she perceived me as judging her when I wasn't judging her. I was admiring her and I was admiring how cute she was and I was admiring how grown up she was. But she was self-conscious wearing something that she doesn't normally wear. And so any attention that I gave her, she was taking as being judging and she was being self-conscious about it. So it kind of gave me this moment that I had to realize that she was perceiving something through the own lens of her insecurity in it. And I was perceiving it through the lens of admiration that I was looking for. But she's just kind of trying to discover herself and figure out her identity and figure out her style. And so many of our kids are doing that right now. And so because of that, they're going to be extra sensitive when something comes up. And the social pressures. I think many of us have blocked out just how bad the social pressures and the complexities of adolescent social relationships can be. And I will tell you that as challenging as it was for us to navigate that stuff, it is like a zillion times harder for today's kids with social media. Teenagers face issues like peer pressure and bullying and romantic relationships, academic stress. And then on top of it, factor in social media and pressures to conform to these perfectly curated images and these totally unrealistic expectations that they see. And then factor in undeveloped brains and social constructs. And this all contributes to that moodiness and that emotional sensitivity. And they just don't have the coping skills to handle it yet. They are still learning how to manage their emotions effectively. They lack the coping skills and the life experiences to deal with challenges that they face in a mature way because they're not mature. And so this can result in those outbursts of emotions or the exaggerated over the top reactions to situations that us as adults might see as being trivial, but to them, it's a big deal. And I think we often, as parents, forget what a big deal these things are. And we look at them through the lens of being an adult and seeing them as being no big deal or being trivial or knowing how to manage it because we have been through it. There's actually a theory called the theory of adolescence, and there is a reason that the author refers to adolescence as being a time of, and they call it storm and stress. And it is because it is characterized by such conflict and mood swings and risk-taking behaviors. But of course, we see it from our perspective, and so we look at them as being overly emotional or irrational, which makes us frustrated and angry. But we can handle it better if we do a few things, okay? So like that active listening that we've talked about time and time again. By showing genuine interest in their thoughts and their feelings and not coming to immediate judgment, we can make them feel more secure in trying to figure who it is out. And yes, as I'm saying that, I realize that I totally didn't do that with a tube top, but I did listen to her when she was telling me then afterwards, but I was apparently showing immediate judgment. I've got to watch my face. Validate their emotions, acknowledge their feelings, reassure them that this is all normal. It's normal to experience intense emotions. I know when my kids will have some kind of outburst and then they will say to me, I'm sorry, I didn't mean, it's like, it's okay. This is normal. We all have emotional outbursts. And especially, you're just trying to figure it out. You're trying to manage it. So in the future, keep this in mind and so you talk about it with them like that. And then also, as I said, we all experience these. Model emotional regulation with them. Demonstrate healthy ways to manage your emotions and to express your emotions. And I realize that that is something that those of us who are Gen X or even elder millennials, especially for our husbands, because it was definitely, I think emotional regulation was not something that was taught to us as kids. Right? We weren't really talked about expressing our emotions. We didn't have Inside Out and Inside Out 2, right? So we didn't really learn about expressing and talking about our emotions. And our husbands, they certainly didn't. And so this modeling of it is so important, but it's also going to be challenging for us to do many times. Okay, so the next frustrating characteristic, or I guess behavior of teenagers that pops to mind, and probably because this is always the issue around my house. And if you go back, I don't even know, a couple of months, there was an entire episode devoted to this: forgetfulness and disorganization. And again, this one is just due to their actual brain development. During adolescence, those frontal lobes are still developing. And that is the part of our brain that is responsible for functions like planning and organizing and memory. So for us to be mad at them because they are struggling with organization or they are forgetful of things, we are essentially angry or punishing them that their brain isn't developed because they can do so much about that, right? So it means that they might struggle with tasks that require good organizational skills or memory retention. So like forgetting to do homework or misplacing important items like keys or phones or shoes or just about everything, right? This is also a time when they're just starting to have increased responsibilities. And as they go from childhood to adulthood, they are expected to take on more responsibilities. So things like managing their own schedules, schoolwork, their extracurriculars, social life, all of those things that increase the demands on them and on their still developing cognitive abilities. And it can overwhelm them. And when their brains get overloaded, it leads to even more forgetfulness and disorganization. So, like when they're juggling multiple assignments and deadlines and jobs and sports and friends and relationships, it can be challenging for a teenager who is just learning their time management skills. And then, of the responsibilities that they do get, they may struggle to distinguish between what is urgent and what can wait, which leads to ultimately forgetting things and seemingly being disorganized. So, like a teenager might forget about a project deadline because they spent too much of their time on less important activities. Or, like happens in my house all the time, we ask them to do something for us. And even if they have every intention to do it, they often don't prioritize it as a do it right now thing. And we do, which then can lead to conflict. And in my opinion, one of the biggest causes in our house are those distractions. In today's digital phone age, teenagers are constantly bombarded with information and stimuli just coming into them from all different sources of social media and video games and messaging, and all of these different things are distractions that can make it difficult for them to focus and concentrate on their important tasks, which then, of course, contributes to that forgetfulness and disorganization. So, like constantly checking notifications on their phone, it can disrupt their ability to remember important things. Now, to us, we may see this behavior and jump to the assumption that they're being lazy or they're being irresponsible or disrespectful, and that can cause arguments and tension and frustration, right? So, what do we need to do? Well, what's my top thing always? We need to communicate. Tell them what you expect from them. Remind them what you expect for them. If something is a priority, tell them. If they're playing a game and you need them to take out the trash, okay? Do you need the trash taken out right then? If so, that's fine, but tell them that. Say, I know you're doing that right now, but I need this trash to go out now. If you tell them, take out the trash, they're going to take out the trash when they're done with their video game. Well, by the time they're done with their video game, there's a good chance that they will have forgotten that you asked them to take out the trash. You might need to use reminders, whether it's verbal reminders, encouraging use of taking notes or calendars or planners or digital reminders. I know I've mentioned this before that my kids have in our texts between us, they will oftentimes text their assignments that they need to do from school during the day. Like, remind me to remind me to, do this. And while I don't go in and remind them, it's kind of like a note-taking thing for them that they know to go back in and look at our texts and they can see what it was that they need to do. And then if it's important and I think of it, then I might even say, hey, I know you sent me a text about something. Do you remember what that was? Or I know you sent me a text to remind you to turn in a form or whatever. And so they can kind of have that as a way to improve. You can create routines for them, something like that, or establish consistent daily routines in order to structure their time. And then, just like those toddlers, the positive reinforcement. I know it feels silly when they're taller than you are, but they need positive reinforcement too. Praise and reward their efforts to stay organized. It's not the same. It is kind of the same thing as giving stickers for good behavior or giving M&Ms for using the potty or whatever. But praise them, reward them when they are doing the things that you want them to do. Okay, so we had the mood swings and emotional sensitivity, and we had the forgetfulness and disorganization, and the third behavior that can cause issues that is just typical teenage stuff comes from their desire for independence and autonomy. Now, in the stages of psychosocial development, adolescence is known as the stage of identity versus role confusion. Okay, it's known that way because teens are striving to establish their own identities. They are in the process of figuring out who they are and what they stand for. They're exploring their own beliefs and their values and their interests and trying to figure out who they are separate from us. And this seeking of self-discovery, it fuels their desire for independence and they want to assert their individuality. So they may want to choose their own clothing style or their music preferences. They choose things in order to express their unique identity. And for some parents, they have a really hard time with this. Okay, some parents have a hard time with, in fact, I see this all the time and I hear this all the time about kids, especially girls, wanting to choose their own clothes and the parents not liking what style the girls are choosing, or the floofy hair. The boy is wanting the floofy hair and the mom's insisting on haircuts. And it's their style and they are trying to figure out this identity. And so they may resist our control because they are seeking autonomy and they are pushing boundaries. Of course, to us, we see this quest for independence as being rebellious. We see it as being disrespectful, but it's really just a part of their psychological development. They're trying to come up and develop that sense of autonomy. They're trying to be independent as they move this big transition from childhood to adulthood. Okay, that's why it's a stage right in between, a stage in and of itself, because they are not kids anymore, but they are also not adults yet. And so this is a natural part of their psychological growth and them forming their self-concept. They want to make decisions for themselves. They want to take control of their lives. They want to do this in order to demonstrate that they are growing up and to demonstrate the maturity that they're getting. So they may want to have a say in decisions that affect their future, like choosing their academic path or setting their career goals. They also, as part of this stage of independence and autonomy, they also crave space and privacy. Having space and privacy allows them to reflect on their thoughts and their feelings and their experiences without feeling that external judgment that they always seem to be thinking is coming from us. So they're off, yes, in their rooms. They have their doors closed. They're kind of holed off. Well, why? They're thinking, they're figuring things out. They're trying to find their own interests, their own ideas, their own values, figuring out who they are. It gives them the opportunity to develop a sense of themselves and to establish boundaries that define who they are. So a teenager might want to spend time alone in their room in order to journal or to listen to music or just to unwind. I think we see our kids holed up in their rooms and we think they're actually trying to stay away from us. But really, it's not about us. It's about them. It's about them and their needs, what they want to do. It's not about us and trying to stay away. And having and being in their own space and having privacy allows them to make decisions, to set boundaries, to assert control over their lives. It gives them a sense of agency and ownership over their personal space. And with their friends and their peers, having space and privacy, it allows them to connect with others, to build those friendships, to nurture those social connections outside of the family unit. It gives them a sense of freedom to interact with their peers in a way that is separate from their family dynamics. And again, it's not about us. It's about them. And this is something I see so often from parents, whether it's, a teenager has a girlfriend or a boyfriend and, not to give them any privacy. Don't leave them alone. Oh, teenagers and raging hormones and blah, blah, blah. And yes, to some degree, 100%. However, also they're trying to find their way. They're trying to figure out how to have an interpersonal relationship with someone without the family looking on. And that's a part of growth and a part of maturing. When they have their friends over, if you're there and you're hovering all the time and they're not having the opportunity to form these peer relationships without you and without your judgment and without your input, they're not getting that self-development that they need. And so they might pull away if you don't give them a space. And, a lot of times families, bedrooms are only for you. Bedrooms are personal. But if they don't have anywhere else to take their friends that's not under your watchful eye, then they're not going to have the space to develop relationships and to interact and to find themselves. And having time in a private space allows them to process their feelings, to recharge, to practice self-care. It gives them a sanctuary, somewhere that they can relax and reflect and be themselves without judgment. So while we may see it as they never come out of their room, so they're actually thinking and decompressing, figuring out who they are and how they fit into the world. Now, a part of this independence also comes from those social relationships, which can even feel a bit hurtful to us, right? Namely, in their prioritization of their social relationships over us or our family. This is the time when teens are exploring their relationships with their peers and establishing their place within their social groups. And having independence from their parents can allow them to build stronger connections with their friends. It can help them to develop a sense of belonging outside of the family unit. And so they desire autonomy, and it's often because of that need to fit in with their peers and to gain acceptance within their social circles. And so we see our teens wanting to spend more time with their friends to nurture those relationships, but we see it as they want to spend less time with us, which is totally hard not to take personally, but it really isn't personal. It isn't about us, no matter how much it does feel like it is. There's a concept in family communication. It's called non-volition. Non-volition is one of the characteristics or functions of a family that makes it different than another type of social system. Non-volition is basically that one of the things that makes families unique is that we are stuck with these people. We don't pick them, but we also can't get rid of them. And even after people die, or even if you're estranged with someone or whatever, they're still your family. Now, of course, the bad part of that is that no matter how much you may want to or try, you can't shake your family. Even if you've cut your sister out, or you're estranged from a parent, or never knew your father, they are still your family and continue to have an impact on your life, even if they are not a daily part of it. But the good side of that is that you can bring your worst and they're stuck with you too. And so our teens often realize this, and they often save their very worst self for us. So the friends, they get the best of them, right? Because social pressures are high. We get the worst sometimes because they know we're not going anywhere, which, yes, it sucks, but it's kind of what we want, right? I mean, we don't want their worst, obviously, but we do want them to feel that sense of security. It would be awesome to have them feel secure and get the good behavior. But we did just talk about their inability to prioritize, right? And as frustrating as it feels to play second fiddle to basically everyone, this quest for independence and autonomy, it's essential for them to build their self-confidence, to help them with their decision-making and their resilience and all of the developmental tasks that we want them to develop. By taking on responsibilities and making choices independently of us, they can get these valuable life experiences that is going to help them grow and help them get ready for adulthood. Now, there's a theory in psychology and in communication called social learning theory, and it emphasizes the role of observational learning in our development. Teens are highly influenced by their peers' behaviors and by their attitudes. So they may even adopt behaviors or opinions that align with their peer group. And these can sometimes be at odds with our values, which may make us feel frustrated, right? And we may make us feel like, why are you so susceptible to peer pressure? So how do we manage this? I mean, other than cry with hurt feelings and frustration. Know their friends. Make an effort to meet and to understand your teen's friend group. Have them over. Make them feel welcome. Make them feel like they're always free to be around you. Promote healthy activities. Encourage them to be involved in extracurricular activities, things that make them have positive social interactions. Talk about peer pressure. Talk openly about the impact that their friends have on them, that this is totally normal. It's not like they are the only ones who are being influenced, and how they can resist negative pressure. Talk about boundaries and set rules. However, be open to their input, open to negotiation and compromise about people being over, about spending time with them or spending time alone in their rooms or giving them a space. And allow them to make choices. Allow them to experience some of the consequences of their choices, obviously within reason, right? And pick your battles. We had a whole episode devoted, right, to picking your battles. But by picking your battles and deciding what is the hill you want to die on here, okay? Is this one really worth it? Support their self-discovery, encourage exploring who they are as individuals who are different and independent from you and from your family unit. And always remember, this too shall pass. Even when their hair doesn't look the way you want it, or even when you look at their outfit and you're like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that you're going out of the house in that. I think of some of the ridiculous outfits that I have worn over the years. This too shall pass. Okay. And the fourth, risk-taking and impulsivity. These are the fears that keep us up at night, right? How often do we tell our kids, make good choices? Because teens in general are notorious for poor choices or risky or impulsive or short-sighted behavior. And again, it's those brains. They are still developing, particularly the prefrontal cortex, that part that we said is responsible for decision-making and impulsive control. And the third lovely thing it's in charge of is risk assessment. And this part of the brain, unfortunately, matures more slowly, and it's what leads to the tendency to act impulsively without fully considering the consequences. And the reward system in the teenage brain is very highly active. And so that makes them very sensitive to rewards and makes them more likely risk-taking behavior that brings them rewards. So like a teenager might engage in risky behaviors like speeding while driving without fully understanding the potential dangers, or drinking, or sexual behavior. Teens have a natural inclination towards seeking things that are novel or exciting or any kind of new experiences. And this drive for stimulation can make them take risks in order to satisfy that curiosity and desire for adventure and new experiences. And we all know that they are highly influenced by their peers and their social groups. And so the desire to fit in and gain acceptance and be seen as cool or daring, it can push them towards engaging in risky behaviors. Peer pressure can override their better judgment, and it can lead them to take impulsive actions that they wouldn't normally consider. So, like a teenager might try smoking or vaping in order to impress their friends, even if they know it's harmful. I know a couple of boys who have kind of turned down this path, one with drinking and hopefully not drinking and driving. I have not heard of him drinking and driving, thank heavens, but drinking and then driving issues as far as he feels a need for speed, apparently. And so I know that he is undertaking these risky behaviors because of this need to fulfill something, this drive for stimulation, this curiosity, this need to fit in, to feel cool. I know another one who has turned towards finding girls on Snapchat and this risky behavior of meeting random girls on Snapchat. And so I hear of these things and I find it so concerning. And I'm so thankful that I am not having to deal with that as a mother with my children. But it's very, very common. And it's because of this need to fit in and this desire for stimulation and for this inability to control impulses and this short-sightedness that they have. And these emotions we talked about before, those factor in here too. They may act impulsively as a way to cope with strong emotions. So like if they're under stress or feel anger or excitement, impulsive behaviors can provide a temporary escape or distraction from emotional turmoil. And honestly, with those two different boys that I mentioned, that is 100% what it is with them, that it is definitely they're trying to cope with some issues that I know that they both have going on in their lives. And so these behaviors, I think, are a temporary escape or a distraction from that. So as parents, if we see something like that, it's one of those we've talked about before, things being a metaphor for something else. And so this behavior is often trying to fulfill a need that maybe we're not even realizing is there or a problem that they are trying to deal with. And this is the inappropriate ways that they are trying to deal with that problem. But of course, obviously, these behaviors can cause significant concern and alarm for us as their parents. So, we can educate them about risks, provide information about the consequences of risky behavior, set clear expectations for them, establish and enforce rules regarding safety and regarding behavior. Give them that independence, but keep some of it supervised. And of course, that's going to be even harder the older they get and the less supervision that you can kind of give them. But understanding that sometimes things are representative of something else going on and possibly helping them to deal with or understand what else is going on, as well as start to understand the consequences of their actions if something goes wrong. And the fifth, well, I could absolutely not talk about the things that teenagers do that make us crazy, but really aren't their fault, without including my very favorite, communication. Of course, our teens often struggle with communication, whether it's with us or with their teachers or with each other. But it's not that they're actually bad communicators. They just have a lot going on developmentally that may make us perceive them that way. So their cognitive abilities are just developing. We've said this. Their capacity for abstract thinking, perspective taking, verbal reasoning, all of these things, just developing. And these cognitive shifts can totally lead to misunderstandings or difficulties in expressing themselves clearly. So, like, I can see my kids sometimes struggling to articulate what it is they mean in a coherent way. Like, they know what they want to say, but it's not coming across right. Their thoughts and emotions are sometimes much more complex than the verbiage that they have to go along with it. And like we've said, their emotions are way intense. And just like us, when we're emotional, it's hard not to let our feelings overwhelm us and overwhelm our ability to effectively communicate. It just happens a lot quicker and more often to them because their emotions are so much more intense. So we have a higher threshold when we're upset or defensive or in an argument. They are threatened and insecure much easier. And so their communication breaks down quicker. And because they're just learning how to navigate social interactions and relationships, they may struggle with asserting their needs or setting boundaries or expressing their thoughts or feelings openly. There are social pressures to fit in or to be perceived a certain way. It can impact their communication skills. So, like, they might avoid difficult conversations out of a fear of rejection or not wanting to deal with conflict. And then they find themselves in an even worse situation than that they're then overreacting to. So it's just all new and complex to them. And then, of course, there is the root of all that is bad and evil, technology and social media. And this prevalence of technology and social media in our teens' lives can also totally impact their communication patterns. Constant digital connectivity, it leads to, with all of us, decreased face-to-face communication skills. And they are reliant on text-based communication and on things like abbreviated forms of expression, so like emojis and acronyms. And even more so, there are insane implications of nonverbals, like just in Snapchat alone. The difference between leaving someone on open and leaving someone undelivered, I guarantee that every one of your kids will tell you exactly what it means to leave someone undelivered and exactly what it means to leave someone on open. And those are different things. And what sending a shoulder pic means and what sending a ceiling pic means and the coveted face pic, it's serious. I mean, my daughter told me how this kid sent her a face pic and she's not into him, but she felt bad, so she sent him a shoulder pic. Like, we think that they can't communicate, but shit, they are communicating in a way that we totally don't even comprehend. But yeah, this can impact their ability to engage in meaningful, in-depth conversations face to face. I mean, I get it. Someone calls me and my first thought is, who's dead? And when it's thankfully no one dead, I'm like, the fuck, it's 2024. Text me like a normal person. I cannot have a conversation on the phone anymore unless I'm driving and then I'm killing time so I can talk. And I can feel the struggle of face-to-face communication if I've been out of that world for a minute. So yeah, I get it. And then with us, keep in mind that the overall communication patterns in our family environment can also influence their communication skills. If there are barriers standing between us with open and honest communication at home, so things like a lack of trust or conflict or poor listening skills, they may struggle to communicate their thoughts and feelings effectively because they might think about us as being judgmental of them or saying no or disapproving. So they may withhold information or emotions if they think we're not going to be receptive or understanding to it. And of course, this list could go on, but I think we've really seen some patterns, right? Their brains are not fully developed. Their hormones are a mess. They're still learning who they are and how they fit into this world. Their emotions are intense. Their cognitive processes and skills still developing. They are trying to establish an identity that is their own, that is separate from us and from the family, at the same time that they're trying to navigate other social systems and peer relationships. It's the perfect storm, really. And no, we can't fix it. There's nothing to fix. They're just at that stage. But we can understand that these behaviors are part of normal development, and that is the first step towards managing them or living peacefully with them. So let's land this plane with 5 things that we can do. Number 1, maintain open lines of communication. So that active listening, showing genuine interest in their thoughts and their feelings, not jumping to immediate judgment or trying to solve their problems, being non-confrontational. So addressing sensitive topics in a calm and respectful way. Don't accuse them, use accusatory language. And yes, this may mean walking on eggshells sometimes, but it's because we are the adults and we are cognitively and biologically developed. We have the skills and the life experiences. So yes, we can be the ones taking the so-called high road. Number 2, set clear boundaries and allow for flexibility. So consistent rules, establish clear expectations of them, establish consequences, but be willing to negotiate, be willing to adapt as your teen matures, as the situation requires. Try to adapt. Encourage autonomous decision-making, encourage problem-solving skills, allow them to make choices within safe boundaries. Number 3, encourage positive peer interactions. Get to know their friends, make an effort to meet and to understand their peer group, promote healthy activities and involvement for them to get these positive social interactions and foster them while they're there. Number 4, understand and empathize. Educate yourself and teens about the changes that we've talked about that are happening in their brain and in how it affects behavior. Obviously, you're listening to a podcast on teens and teen development and family communication. So you obviously care about this. Sometimes that compassion just gets lost in translation when we're talking to our teens who are not seeing us in that manner. So let them know that you understand the changes that are happening to them, and you know that some of their behavior is coming from this. So showing empathy towards their struggles and being patient with them as they navigate this complex stage. Number 5, modeling appropriate behavior. Our favorite, right? Leading by example, demonstrating those healthy communication skills, our emotional regulation, our problem-solving skills. Have our behavior teach them the way that they should be handling things, and show mutual respect. If our behavior treats our teens with respect, it fosters a reciprocal relationship. We can't expect them to show these things to us if we're not showing them to them. And it's like, yeah, but they acted this way towards me. But you know what? We're the grown-ups. And so we're the ones who should be doing the modeling of the behavior, even if it's hard sometimes. Thank you so much for listening, for being here today. And always, if you've enjoyed the show, please share it with your friends. That's how we will grow our community. Find me on socials. It's Reframing Me everywhere. Until next time, be well and communicate.